Welcome to the Home Fellowship Podcast. We are a place where the students of Belfast can gather together and encounter Jesus, and then go live a life like him. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Feel free to check us out on Facebook and Instagram for our upcoming events. Okay, so welcome to the first ever Home Fellowship Podcast. We're here with Owen. Owen, thank you very much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Owen is coming to speak at our event on the 2nd of October on Fear. We're going to hear a wee bit about that in a minute or two. But Owen, would you just introduce yourself to us, if that's okay?
Yeah, my name's Owen. I am the pastor here at CFC over in East Belfast. Been doing that for 2.5 years now. Moved here, obviously accent not local, so moved here 8 years ago with my family. So kids grew up here, all settled in now. Sound Northern Irish. I had a dark day a few years ago when my son announced during the England-Ireland game that he would now be supporting Ireland, which was just a horrible day, particularly as Ireland won, and it was just devastating in my family. But I feel very much this is home now and love it.
Amazing. We're just going to ask a couple of different questions. We're going to kick off with a bit of a funny one, bit of a weird one. When you were a student, did you have a key dish that you would whip up? Did you have a key, a meal that you'd like?
Well, as I was broke. A broke student, so pasta was just like the staple. So pasta with the cheapest sauce you can find in Super Value. But I did actually, the thing that I whipped out that people, when people came around, was always pancakes. For some reason, the recipe my mum taught me as a kid, that grew up with, just people loved. So we just used to make, and it's cheap as anything, and you can put anything. It's a crowd pleaser. So pancakes is the way, mate. Every day.
Pancakes and pasta, love that.
Carbs.
I love that. Thanks so much. So, did you enjoy being a student?
Yes and no. I had kind of a mixed experience as a student. So the first period, probably most of the first year was good, but probably for not great reasons, and then kind of went into a bit of a downward spiral, which was bad. And then halfway through my second year, kind of turned it around, and then finished actually really strong. And actually, did love being a student.
Yeah, amazing. Where and what did you study?
I went to Manchester. I studied business management.
Okay, cool.
Just kind of randomly, I kind of fell into it, actually. I didn't really want to go to university, but that particular time in my life, I didn't know what to do, didn't know where I was going to go, what I was doing, wasn't really walking with God at all. And I went to visit a friend at university, and they just had parties all the time. And I was like, I'm crazy not to. And this was a time when they gave me a grant to go to university, and there were no student fees. Yeah. So I'm like, heck, I'm going. So, and that was just the easiest course to get onto. So
amazing. And were you a Christian, or did you become a Christian during university? What was your story?
It's a bit of an interesting journey. I grew up in an Anglican church in like rural Sussex, right down in the southeast of England. So kind of think Vicar of Dibley. That's kind of where I grew up, and used to go on these summer camps every year. So like activity camps, they would call them Cypher Ventures. They were, and I used to go for the sailing and the rock climbing and stuff like that. And as I got a bit older, I went for the girls and the sailing and the adventure and the rock climbing, and then had a moment as a 15-year-old, a kind of the first ever realization of my own mess and my own selfishness. And I remember being on my own in this room. Everybody else was kind of having fun. I was in a bit of a dark place and just had this overwhelming realization of my own mess, which was so crushing. And then almost like instantaneously after that, just this overwhelming sense of God's love. I've never felt anything like it. It just felt like, it's bizarre. It felt like God filled the room with love, and I just broke, confessed, like poured out my heart to him, like, not articulate. It was like blubbery tears, just stuff. And that time encountered God. I remember leaving that room just kind of like so wide-eyed, because I spent my whole life hearing about God. I grew up in a Christian home, heard about God, but never encountered him. And I remember grabbing my youth leader by the shirt collar and shaking him, going, "It's real. It's real." And he was a bit like freaked out by the whole thing. So that was at 15. Trouble with that is then I didn't really have any kind of discipleship to go into. I kind of went to church, which is okay, and I had some great youth leaders that actually I'm so grateful for, because they kept me in church, but they weren't in my local area, and I kind of had to relate to them from a distance from the camps that I went on. So as a 15-year-old, and then 16, 17-year-old, where I grew up, you could go to pubs at 16 and 17-year-old quite happily when your mates mum's the barmaid. It was, so I was drinking from that age, partying, all of that kind of lifestyle. And yeah, I had this weird double life where I'd go to church, tell my friends about Jesus, but tell my friends about Jesus while getting drunk.
Okay.
Just mess, really. Took a year out, traveled around the world, more mess. Came back, went to university. First year, just partied. It was freshers party. Work wasn't difficult. Didn't really find the library until the second year. And then in the summer of my first year, I was dating a girl that was kind of not healthy for me. It was just a mess. I ended up being vice president of the Christian Union somehow, even though I was living this life. It was all weird. And then beginning of the second year, just this downward spiral, just dark mess, horrible. Started being even more antagonistic, gobby, jerk, basically. And it all culminated like December, January time. We were meeting as the Christian Union exec. There's only about 5 or 6 of us in this room, and I was just being so obnoxious and arrogant, and any kind of idea anyone put up, I would just rip to pieces. I was just being and they didn't know how to handle me. The room was kind of a bit like, what do we do with this guy and all this kind of stuff. And until one of my friends in the room just cut across everything. He just looked at me and said, "Owen, can I pray for you?" Which was such a weird thing. Like, bizarrely, that was a weird thing to say. And I was like, well, I suppose so. Yeah, whatever. I was such a jerk. It was unreal. So he asked me to stand. I remember sitting on the floor. He asked me to stand, and he started praying for me. And I don't to this day. I've spoken to him about it actually since. He's now pastoring in England actually. And I don't know what he prayed, but something in me, I literally felt something break, and I just sobbed, like proper, undignified, snot dripping off my nose, sobbing. And I remember I had these two thoughts kind of happen simultaneously. One, the first thought was, as I opened my eyes and I'm sobbing and literally this snot dripping off my nose onto my shoes. And I had this thought, and I said, this was my thought. There are pretty girls in this room and I'm snot dripping off my nose and I don't care. Yeah. Which was the first time that happened probably in my life. I didn't care what people thought. So that was different. And then that next realization of, I've got to make a decision about God. Yeah. I cannot keep running. Either he's real and I am all in, like everything, him, or I'm done. Yeah. And actually, when I had that moment, I realized, well, I can't deny you. Like, I've seen enough of you. I've met you. Yeah. I've encountered you. I've read your word. Because even though I was walking away from him, I mean, I read the Bible. I'd looked at the kind of the historical evidence. I'd done all that. Like the empty tomb, like just completely, still to this day, the empty tomb stuns me. I'm like, the only explanation for the empty tomb is he rose from the dead. There's no other logical explanation for what happened. So he has to be who he says he is. So I'm like, right, well, in that case, you know, man, I am all in. Brilliant. So I just went all in as a 20-year-old. Yeah. And young, dumb, arrogant, thought I knew everything. I became a bit of a religious zealot, Pharisee almost. And that's just kind of a journey that I think loads of people go on in their lives when they encounter God. And they're like, wow, this is, and then think we know all the answers and all that stuff. But yeah, so that was and then to the last part of my university experience was just trying to reach my whole university for Jesus as quickly as I can, recklessly, stupidly, but with total passion for Jesus and just wanted people to encounter him. Amazing. So it's good fun. Yeah. And your friends then after that stage where you were 20 and you were all in, did your friends that you were partying with, did they see a difference? Was there a bit of a real they didn't quite know what to do. Really didn't know what to do. We're good about it. I probably wasn't as sensitive or as wise as if I like, looking back now, I would have done things differently. But you know, there's something about just the naivety of just passionate love for Jesus that God seems to be okay with, which is brilliant. There was some awkwardness, there was some weirdness. I was weird, which made them weird, but kind of as I grew, we still retained friends. There were a few times when they tried to get me drunk and spike my drinks, which went down badly. So we had some conversations about you shouldn't do that again, and stuff like that, which is cool. So it was a real. I mean, looking back, it was such a great time to be able to speak into those guys' lives, and I remember playing like worship songs in the kitchen and stuff like that, and they were like, "You're so weird."
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
But then they started singing along to
Class.
play. It was like when Hillsongs had those out, like CDs. How old it is?
Yeah.
Hillsong CDs and stuff, and they were loving it. So
Brilliant.
yeah, it was good fun.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, like Home Fellowship, we're all about that. Student ministry, all about trying to get people to go
Brilliant.
all in. That's amazing, because there's a fact that if statistically, if you are to walk away from your faith, apparently 75% of people do it between the ages of 18 and 25.
Yeah.
So there's real crucial age there. But what advice would you give Christian students today, just off the back of that, like Christian students who are kind of maybe coming up to Belfast for the first time, stuff like that there, if you have any advice?
My that kind of the critical advice is always local church.
Yeah.
So although you are a student, what actually helped me so much was a local church. Getting connected was a local Baptist church that I was part of there. I actually got baptized in that church. And it was almost like the normality, because university can be such a bubble. It's full on, particularly the first year is full on.
Yeah.
And then when exams kick in, that's full on. So full on party, full on exams. Just the whole kind of, it exists in its own right, really. And the need to detox from that, I think, is so important, to get plugged into a good local church. And while you're there, be all in with the church. So I'm always into, wherever you're going to be present. Sometimes students I've seen, and I did it for a little while, and friends of mine did it, is they kind of like drift into this church and then drift into that church and drift into that church. You're never going to find a perfect church.
Yeah.
Never. And particularly, it won't be perfect if you join it. So, find a local church that is family, that you can respect the people there, respect the leaders, be loved there, and just be there, serve them, help them, whatever it is, but get connected. If you can get connected to that family, I think that can be a real source of strength and help, and sometimes just detox from university life. All of that stuff is really, really healthy for you. The church is supposed to exist as a family, which means multi-generational. And one of the issues of universities, there's so many people of such the same age, and they need that multi-generational input, kids and grandparents and all of that kind of stuff. So that would be my one piece of advice: local church.
Perfect. Owen, thanks so much. We're just going to finish. You're coming to speak on the 2nd of October on fear.
Yeah.
Have you a bit of a story or experience regarding fear? And also, can you just share briefly what you're going to be chatting about on that night?
Yeah, fear is just a fascinating subject. It is and I haven't counted, but theologians tell me this. It is the single most repeated command in the whole Bible is do not fear.
Well,
like over and over and over again, God says to his people, do not fear, do not fear. Jesus says to people, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. And it's just, when I look around the world and I look around what God's asking his church to do, and to love people and to forgive people and to influence culture and do all these things, the major thing that will stop us is fear. Fear of what people will think, fear of failure, fear that I'm not good enough, fear that people will think that I'm arrogant, or all of these kind of things. And there's a whole bunch of myths around fear, like we think that we shouldn't do anything until all the fear goes away. And that's not it at all. I think if the people without fear are basically borderline sociopaths. Like, you will always have fear, but it's doing things with, like, it's understanding what that is, understanding it, processing it, and stepping out regardless. Like, I'm going to fulfill the command of God, even though I feel afraid. I'm going to do it anyway, because I'm going to obey his commands, because his commands are greater than the fear I face. His love is greater than the fear I face. His power is greater than the fear I face. So I can do all those things and just embrace that fear and do whatever God's called me to do, which is, particularly in our modern world, we need people to step out. I've got a real passion about Christians getting out of the church and stepping into culture, influencing politics and business, and particularly art and creativity. But to create, you have to embrace fear, because the reason people don't create is because they're afraid, and they're afraid of criticism and opinions and not being good enough and all that kind of stuff. But if we can shake that off the church and release the church into creativity full of the Spirit of God, man, it'd be absolutely awesome.
Amazing. Well, I'm so excited. So the 2nd of October, Owen's come to speak. Our very first night. We're meeting on the 25th for a night of celebration, but the 2nd of October is when you kick off our series. So Owen, we're so excited, and thank you so much for today. Thank you for spending some time.
No problem at all.
This quick first podcast. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully this went too well. So appreciate it, Owen. Okay, thank you.
So. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks again for listening today. And for more information, please check out our Facebook and Instagram. See you soon.